What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of B is for Build. In today's episode, we got this huge list of all the stuff we got to do before we can turn our engine on for the first time. Over here, I've got this Texas Speed 430 cubic inch engine. It cost $1 gajillion to purchase. It's an amazingly built thing that can handle up to 1,500 wheel horsepower, and we've never heard it run. It's time to hear it run. That's what we're going to do in today's episode. Stay tuned. We're doing two pretty fun upgrades, you could call it, to our oiling system on this car. So one is our oil cooler, which you already saw is installed. And then the other one is a remote mount oil filter. So we can, that's gonna help us make the oil pan shorter. That way the oil filter isn't hanging out past the oil pan. And it also helps us kind of route our lines and stuff like that. So this thing is, I'm gonna find a spot to mount it right down here. That way we can access it from underneath the car. I'll probably be cutting out some of that sheet aluminum right there. And I'm thinking maybe on that upper frame rail, bottom frame rail, not really sure. I'm gonna find a nice place, so this thing's gotta get bolted in, and then we'll be able to screw our oil filter onto there, and then our lines come in and out here. So we have to route the lines so that they're gonna go through the cooler, through the filter, through the cooler, and then back into the engine. Alright, so now you gotta see what this thing's meant to do. The line goes in, the line goes out. It's configurable, so you can do both in or out on one side if you want to. It goes in, goes out, and in the meantime it filters through this massive oil filter. So I built a little bracket here, and then this bracket is gonna get welded onto the frame right about here. We still need to stiffen up our frame join right there, so I'm gonna leave some room for that. And so next step, I'm gonna go ahead and clean this area up, prepare it for a weld. We'll get the welder set up, and then I'm gonna go ahead and tack weld this thing in here. It'll be fully welded out once we move the tanks and do our final frame painting. But I'll get it tack welded in here so we can have it sturdy for the day. And then when I'm in there, I also gotta cut, there's this like useless plate right down there that needs to be cut out, so that way if we're like at the track or anything, that somebody can reach their hand straight up from underneath and unscrew the filter for an oil change. Or anywhere really, you don't have to be at the track, you just want to have access to the oil filter. Oscar showed up and he said it'd be a lot safer given that there's a gas tank right there if we just, you know, use the TIG. So we threw a couple tacks in there, and again, once we pull everything out for final paint job on the frame, we'll fully weld that out, and we put it over our seam to act as a fish plate a little bit. So that's cool. Now we're gonna kind of divide up and conquer a little bit. Oscar, some of that, we just built a list of all the stuff that we need to do. One of our exhaust headers isn't fully welded out. Oscar's gonna get started on that, and then while he's doing that, Kyle and I are gonna start mapping out our turbo oil feed lines, oil return lines, and water lines. Alright, we figured out all of our plumbing. We have all the right stuff that we need to do that. We need some serious high precision welding, which is an Oscar thing, but he's currently busy. So we need to start working on the next thing, which is pulling the engine out so we can get the oil pan off for Oscar to weld the bungs onto it. So the only bummer is now it's totally filled up with water. Yeah, we got a controlled chaos here, try and capture all the water that we can in the bucket, and then drain the bucket, and then go back and forth and back and forth. You know the drill. is drained, engine's out. We're gonna go ahead and pop off this oil pan, hand it over to Oscar. He's gonna weld on the bungs real quick. He's gonna take a break from what he's doing. He's gonna weld on the bungs for us so we can get the oil pan back on, torque to spec, and put back on the engine, and then the engine back in the car. Welded on our dash 10, these are dash 10 steel AN bungs. So one of these is going to be oil out and one's oil in, and don't worry, I'll figure out which one's which before we do anything too serious. Last thing that we got to do to have this oil pan prepped, other than later on in the game, we're going to cut this thing and shorten it up, right? But that's not right now. What we're going to do is weld in some steel turbo return lines. So we have 2 turbos, so each side will get a return line. We're going to weld it in at about a 45-degree angle, and that's like a barbed fitting because we're going to run rubber hose to it. So somewhere right around here, we're gonna do that. Oscar's gonna do that. All right, we got the oil pan all on there and torqued down to spec. So these are our turbo return barbed fittings right here. And you want to keep them at an angle so the hose is going to run down and hit that. We got it at the most angle we could before, you know, worrying about this lip right here. And remember, you want to put them up as high as you can, because if you have back pressure from oil being in the pan, that's going to be really bad. I made that mistake when I was really new working on these things. So that's pretty cool. We got our barbed fittings right there and our oil return right there. We are now able to get this thing back in the car and start actually plumbing it for the first startup. All right, we got the spark plugs all installed. That was super easy. So now we're gonna move on to our coils. So you guys remember before we were just doing a test startup with a test junk engine, and we used these Gen 3 LS coils, and I think they would have worked, but they don't work up to like really high horsepower. You gotta get upgraded coils. And so I hit up MSD, and they very, very kindly provided us for this build with some awesome upgraded coils. Now these things can handle a lot more horsepower than your stock coils, and they're just, you know, better quality built and more reliable and all that other good stuff. So they gave us not only these, but then new cabling and relocation brackets too. So really, really cool. Shout out to MSD. Big thanks for that. We're going to put a link in the description. You guys should check out their website. They got a bunch of awesome stuff on there. So we're going to make room for the relocation brackets. They're actually smaller than the ones that we used before. I mean, look at the size difference. A lot smaller, so that's cool, but we got to modify our bracket and our mounting strategy, and then we're going to throw all the coils into the relocation brackets, build our cabling, and get it set up on the engine. After some small modification to our relocation brackets, they are bolted back up, and then we ran our cables. We got our new cables and everything. So that is all installed. Now we haven't done this before, but we're going to try and put the exhaust manifolds on outside of the car, and then see if we can get the engine into the car with them on. So that's the next step. New gaskets for the exhaust manifold, and then we're going to bolt them all up. All right, exhaust manifolds are on. Kyle and I are gonna work on getting this thing back into the car. While we're doing that, Oscar is going to weld our water return line. You guys remember in the last episode, we had this hose kind of running out. Well, we've ordered a steel braided line right there, and then he's gonna weld in a fitting so it can go up into the center of our reservoir properly. got our 4AN inlet right there, welded in. So right off of that steam line is where we're going to run that. So actually, before we get too far along with the wiring harness, we got to get our steel braided hose on there. So we'll do that right now. We're gonna get that thing back installed. Oscar's gonna, start doing the reinstallation of the engine. So running the wiring harness, exhaust manifolds, turbos, cooling lines, reservoir back in. While that's going on, I'm gonna be working on plumbing the oil cooler and the inline oil filter. So you guys remember the last episode we welded on the 2 bungs to the oil pan. So we're gonna run right off the oil pan down into our oil filter, into our oil cooler, and back into the engine. All right, I want to give you guys an update. So after adding the Steamline kit in the last episode, it did give us a little bit more like buildup. So the manifold's having a little bit of trouble cinching down onto that. And so Oscar's over here modifying our, this is our manifold pressure line that runs out to our ECU. So we're kind of getting that a little bit lower, and that's looking good. Oil lines are done. I want to give a shout out to our guys over at Finishline Factory. They've hooked us up with all the AN fittings on this build, and these are really good fittings. They're really easy to build, and they've been working out great for so like all of our water fittings, our Finishline Factory, our oil, we're going to be doing our trans cooler, everything's Finishline Factory. There's actually a link to their website in the description along with a discount code for 10% off. If you need AN fittings, water, gasoline, oil, E85, any of that stuff, guys, go check it out. Head out to their website. They got you covered. So you can see the oil lines run from the oil pan over there, down there, through there, into our whatchamacallit? Oil filter? Right. Oil filter, back up into our oil cooler, and then once it's cooled, it goes right back into the engine. So we got to keep trucking. We're going to get the intake manifold on, and then it might be time to start looking at some turbo plumbings. Actually, I changed my mind. Before we do the turbo placement and start running lines down from that, I want to get the oil catch can placed because it kind of goes behind it. This is a really, really nice piece made by Motion Raceworks. I'm going to put a link in the description of their website. Shout out to them. Thank you for hooking us up with this. Before I go do that, I just really quickly want to mention something to all you builders out there. So you guys know that we're just like working full steam ahead to get this engine set up, everything installed correctly so we can fire it up and hear it run for the first time. It's a really big make it or break it moment. It's a milestone moment for the car, and there's a lot, there's a lot on the line. And I've realized something, that anytime we're doing one of these builds, there's a lot of kind of emotional investment in it working. As you start to get close to that make it or break it point, that prove it out point, be it your first drive down the road or your first engine start, like with this one, things tend to start to slow down. And they're probably slowing down for 2 reasons. One is you're probably taking your time to make sure that you do everything right at this stage so you don't destroy your really great project. But I think the other one is that you start to get nervous. Maybe not scared, but you start to get nervous, and you start to understand what's on the line, and it starts to become really real. Like today or tomorrow, we're gonna fire up this engine, and it's all either gonna work or it's not gonna work. And you start to worry about how bad it's gonna feel if it's not gonna work. You don't normally think about how great it's gonna be if it does work. And it's really easy with builds to get stalled out. And I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands of builds out there. I'm sure there are thousands of builds out there that are sitting in someone's lawn because they kind of got stalled out at this kind of make it or break it point. They're probably 3 days work away from getting it to run, but they're just like, I don't know, I don't want to, So I did just want to share with everybody that's a totally normal feeling. You got a lot on the line, and you understand how bad it's going to feel if you mess it up, or that you just have to admit that maybe you did something wrong if it goes wrong. The only thing I could say is just put one foot in front of the other and just keep doing what you're doing. Be careful, pay attention to what you're doing, and make sure that you keep everything safe and you do everything the right way that you know how. But just don't let yourself stop or stall or pause or slow down at these key pivotal moments, because the payoff feels so good. But I did want to share that that is a feeling that everybody that's really invested in a build shares with you. So just keep building, do what you planned out to do, and if it doesn't work, you will be able to fix it. For instance, if we blow up this motor, something catastrophically wrong. Why can't I say catastrophic when I need to? So guys, remember, just like keep building, stick to your original plan, see it through. If something goes wrong, you will be able to fix it. You got yourself here in the first place. You could fix a problem if it goes wrong. And then once you get over it, it's so much fun because then you get to actually use the thing. So that's my little pep talk. I'm gonna install an oil catch can and some lines, which are really fun to make. I'm really enjoying making these AN lines, said no one ever. So I built this bracket that kind of bends. It does like a interesting, like, because it had to bend down and then do a 90. That got me my mounting bracket like right where I wanted. Originally we thought we were going to mount this thing over there, and we did not. So after I built it, bolted it in there. So this piece used to be removable, but then we welded a bracket onto it, so it's no longer removable, but this piece underneath still is. So I wanted to bolt into that. So it's bolted into that, welded into that. Now I can go ahead and install the oil catch can into there and then run the lines. While I was finishing that up, Oscar got here and started working. Oscar and Kyle started throwing the turbos on, and we're gonna start looking at all the plumbing lines around there. Alright, got the oil catch can installed and the new hoses running back over to our valve cover, so that's really, really cool. So any excess crank case pressure will go up through this and then into our oil catch can. So you saw Oscar install the turbos and then throw in, those are the start of our drain lines. What he's going to be doing now is fabricating the rest of the drain line. We're going to run a steel line that goes right past here. So you know, for the drain line, it's not high pressure. It just needs to be at a nice downhill slant all the way back to our oil pan. And all these lines are also going to be sheathed. We've been talking to PTP Turbo Blankets, and they're going to send us some, some like nice sheathing that can handle high temperatures. So anyways, it's going to run down here, and then we're going to do another flexible piece of hose then before it goes into the oil pan, so our steel line doesn't break from all the vibrations or anything else like that. And then we have water. We have 2 more water lines. So there's a lot of lines that have to run off of these turbos. You got your high pressure oil, low pressure oil, and 2 water lines on each turbo. We're just trying to make that not look ugly. Well, we had a bit of a problem. Oscar did a great job welding and filling the gaps that we needed, but once we tried to kind of stress test this thing, it just straight up snapped off. So, bit of an alloy problem, right, Oscar? What were you thinking? Non-compatible alloys? Yeah, non-compatible alloys. Problem. So we had to get into solution mode. I really wanted to run hard lines because I thought we were going to have to run right through our exhaust manifold. Like on my 2JZ project, we had to come down and then run through some of the runners. On this one, since they're so far, like they're so high up, we can actually get a little bit more creative. So we're totally kind of changing up the whole strategy for our turbo coolant lines and our turbo oil drain lines, and going back to using our standard nylon braided, and then underneath that you got steel braided lines. So these ones have Teflon inside, so they can withstand even higher temperatures. So as we're leaving the turbo, boom, we're going Teflon. Then we're running into our standard steel braided line, which is going to come back here, and we're going to build a bracket on both of the sides to hold the lines far away from the exhaust, and then they're going to do what they do. Like the water lines are actually going to go this way, and the drain line will go right back into there. So we don't have what we need for the water lines because that's like a totally new game plan now, but the drain lines, we still have enough stuff, so we're going to go ahead and build the oil drain lines out. And the oil pressure line, I'll install that real quick too. All right, we got our oil drain lines from the turbos hooked up, which means like we are this close to being able to start the car. And then someone pointed out that in the last episode when we swapped the clutch, we forgot to put the ring gear on the clutch assembly. This is what connects with the starter, so no ring gear, no start of the engine. One small design flaw that we have in this setup is that to take the transmission off, we have to take the whole engine out. So everything's got to come out one more time. We'll take the transmission off, transaxle off of the back of the engine, we'll install our ring gear, we'll get everything put back on, and we'll get it back in the car. And then we're this close. So that took 2 hours to do what you guys just saw. We pulled the engine, installed that ring gear, threw the transmission back together, engine back in the car, and we're almost all back buttoned up. But now we're doing some more mods. So we need to apply a bunch more grounding straps and do things. We got to install our wide bands in our exhaust and wire those up to the ECU. We got to fill it up with break-in oil and fill up our oil coolers and all the auxiliary systems with break-in oil. And then we need to bead roll the intake manifold tube, throttle body tube, the one that's going to go between here and the air-to-water intercooler, and the tubes that go, the charge pipe tubes. Then we'll be ready. guys, yesterday we had a mad scramble to get a ton of stuff put back together on the engine. So drain lines are done. Obviously our charge pipes are in. Our center tube connecting the air to water intercooler to our intake manifold is done. Grounding straps are done. Everything's done. We're ready to start the car except for break-in oil. So we're gonna go ahead and fill this baby up with break-in oil, wire up the ECU, install our base map, and it'll be time to get this thing started. All right, guys, it seems that I have done it again. I'm sitting here editing, and I realized that if I release this all, I try and make this all one episode, it would have spanned 9 days of working on the car and been like an hour-long episode. And I don't want to do that. I want to try and keep these things shorter so people don't have to like plan their whole day around just watching some YouTube. But the other thing is I don't want to cut anything out. I don't want to leave anything because I think it's really cool that this build, where we're doing such a crazy transformation from a burnt up piece of crap little shell to a full-on car, and we've literally shown every cut, every weld, everything. I just don't want to leave anything out. So I'm going to cut this here, and then very shortly, like day after tomorrow, I'm just going to release part 2 of this, where we actually start up the engine and it fires up. It is not without issues getting it started, and then we have even more to follow after we start it. So you guys won't want to miss it, but I am going to end this one here. Thank you so much for watching. Next one is a really exciting one, so make sure to be subscribed so you don't miss that. And thank you guys all so much for the support. As of today, we have 18 days left until SEMA, 18 build days left until SEMA, but there is a little bit of work that's already been done that you guys haven't seen yet. So it's crunch time. I'm heading back to the shop right now. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I'll see you soon. Peace!